We have a returning guest today, my dear friend Hank Kraychir, who is a professor and a Masonic scholar, and he's going to be returning today to talk about the elemental spirits as well as disembodied ones and how they influence us. We're going to get into many fascinating subjects and ideas involving this. But first of all, I want to tell you all about these incredible functional mushrooms, which I know Hank takes also. We take lion's mane every day, which helps our cognitive abilities, our focus, our memory, but also reishi is good for relaxation, cordyceps for energy, and there are so many benefits to taking chaga and the others. I do urge you to go to neurobuddha.com, and if you do go to the site, you can check out with the coupon code ENOC20 to save 20%. But we also want to urge you all to go check out a dear friend of our show, Michelle Hood. She has Light the Light Pyramids, and you always want to have that good energy, especially when we're talking about these spiritual influences in our life and energetic life forms, and there's nothing better than orgone. Hank, on our last show, we talked about elementaries. We talked about the elemental beings a bit, and we got into how they influence us through our thoughts. Now, what is the greatest example you can give us of these entities who traditionally we've been told were the sylphs, the salamanders, the gnomes, the undines, and these beings? How do they influence our lives outside of alchemy?
Well, a lot of people, they're kind of making them cartoon characters today. I'm like, no, they're not. I mean, you're trying to make them cutesy. It's really fascinating. So staying along the lines of Paracelsus, his ideas of the elementaries. We talked about those. If people want to know more about elementaries, that's the first line that you need to defend yourself against. But today we're going to be talking about the elementals. These are kind of the bigger ones that we're pretty much aware of. People don't think about the little vampire ones that attach to yourself and attach to your soul. And we'll talk a little bit more about the soul when we get to Disembodied. So, but the elementals, go back to King Solomon's seal, right? Solomon's seal. Yes. And you've got the 5-pointed star. And of course, everyone who says if they wear that amulet, it gives them power, right? Or protection from the spirit world. Well, it's a half truth, right? Like most folklore stories, there's an element of truth to it. If you know what it means and you apply its meaning. And so we're going to go into basically what the seal is. And it's gone through obviously the mystery schools. It's taught, as I mentioned, it's talked about some of the church doctors and church fathers and some of the saints. They talked about the 4 elements of the elemental world. And so the top one is, of course, ether. And let me broadly define that a little bit. Not only is it ether, it's heaven, it's Akashic record, the ethereal realm. It's God, it's heaven, it's Jesus, right? Whatever you need to put that top pinnacle, that's what it generally means. Remember, we live, of course, these spirits, we're in a particular dimension. They live in an infinite amount of dimensions. I used to experiment with the idea there were 9 dimensions or 12 dimensions or whatever. We know there are different levels of heaven and so forth. But think of it as the spirit world. And that's why they call it the ether, because that's that open space between me and the computer screen is the ether, infinite amount of dimensions and spirit types. Okay, that's the top one. Now, the 4 ones at the bottom, that's earth, water, air, and fire. Now, of course, like in most literature, they'll read that. Most people will read that and just forget about it. Manly P. Hall, 33-degree Freemason, a brilliant, prolific writer. As I mentioned in our last episode, he was actually a Christian minister, a ordained Christian minister, and he taught comparative religion, and that set the basis for his esoteric teachings throughout his life. And so he defined it and I read his 1964 edition, Paracelsus. And in that book, he defined it all. They're not cartoon characters. It's not folklore. It actually explains the spirit world based on the teachings of Paracelsus. Now, other people have written about Paracelsus as well, and Manly P. Hall isn't alone, but within Masonic circles, there's only a few people that have written about Paracelsus. Manly P. Hall, of course, Albert Pike, J.D. Waite, all of them use the basic teachings of Paracelsus, okay? Now, let's go with fire, because what are the two most powerful elements in the universe is fire and water.
And if we could back it up a bit before you get into fire, especially when we talk about, well, fire and water will be the salamanders and the undines, right? So when we look over at the pentagram, and I just want to back that up for people because we get that idea also from Pythagoras with the penta, the 5, which is actually interesting that Venus moves in that formation, and we've associated Venus with this. But when you look at that, let's say we have spirit facing up in the elements, and like you were talking about with Solomon's seal, then you could have earth, you could have air, you would have air, fire, water, all these various elements that come into this equation. Some groups, and this is very important when people look at this, why do when we look on the devil card in the tarot, and devil is just evil with a D in front of it, by the way, and you see on the devil card, it's all the earthly material things that which is lived,
by the way, which is lived opposite.
Absolutely. What's really interesting too on the devil card, just like when you see on the pentacles cards, you'll see grapes. Grapes, they were thought to have gold inside of their branches. So it's associated when you see them holding grapes in on the devil card, it talks about wealth and materialism, and there's an association there. It sees them tied down, but above that, you see the inverted pentagram, which sometimes, as you see the Baphomet or the Baphomet, which was misappropriated from the Templars, it was superimposed on top of this. Now, the reason they did that is when you look at these elements, they put, instead of putting spirit facing up as the most important things, some of these groups would invert the pentagram so the other elements of materialism and earthly things come first, spirit facing down.
Keep it simple, good versus bad, right? If up is good, down
right
is bad. It's just it's opposite. That usually that's what God is good. The adversaries of God are bad.
That's right. Well, God comes from gut, or Gott, the German word for God is good. And if evil is another form of ignorance, this is an interesting thing too, Hank, before you go off into this about the elements. When we think about the universe, and you think about a hydrogen atom, what do we say happened when the beginning of the universe? We have a hydrogen atom, and then we add a proton and electron. This is the good and the bad, the yin and the yang. It's just like light. A photon can exist in two states, a particle and a wave. There's always this balance in the universe, but I think it's fascinating how then you correlate this into the elementals. Please continue.
Yeah, so let's go based on Paracelsus' ideas and teachings, which have basically spread throughout the esoteric and, may I suggest, even the Christian community. Some people just refer anything to do with elements as bad. No, Paracelsus was quite clear, just as my priest said, they're benign. Think of even the elementaries, they are benign. They only respect the vibration that you put off of good, right? Of morality, because morality basically dismisses aberrant behavior because it's a negative vibration. That's all it is. Get past the act of doing whatever you're doing that's wrong. You know it's wrong, but it feels good because what? You're pleasing the spirits, right? And but anyway, okay, so you've got fire. Now, fire is referred to as salamanders. Now, this is fascinating because I'm a salamander type. I'm influenced by the salamander influence of the spirit world. No doubt about it, most men are, but let's say warrior. Now I'm no longer a physical warrior. I'm too old for that. So I'm more of a spiritual warrior now, right? And so, but I'm still a warrior class in the sense of fire. Now, fire out of control is a very destructive force, but it can be, you can also, it's a positive energy. I asked my priest, I said, hey, what's the candle at fire? What's the candle for used in the church? He says, well, it's to draw the spirit. Which is what? Is God, but it's the act of, everything is God. but it's the active force of God. It's Helena Blavatsky would have called it the sidewheel force of the universe. It's that energy that comes in. It is fire. In Scottish Rite Freemasonry, it's a double-headed eagle, or not the eagle, the phoenix, right? Which is
the
what?
Same thing.
Because, and I've had people debate with me, on the internet, and they say, well, no, birds are not, are reptiles. I said, look it up. Yes, they are. It's a reptile. And he referred to them as lizard-like creatures. So we know fire, right, is the active force of the universe. By the way, no one said they're pretty. They're not. In fact, they're kind of freaky. And I had to apologize. Sometimes my interaction with them, I have to apologize and say, guys, I'm sorry, man. You kind of freak me out when I see it. But they understand. But it is not necessarily a good or bad force. They're benign. But if they're directed by God, they will react. Now, left unattended, what happens with fire that's out of control? It's very destructive. That's where morality comes in. Okay, so they're salamanders or they're lizard-like creatures. We know, for example, people that have a UFO experience, they often refer to these as what? Lizard-like creatures. That's why we come up with hybrids, and we come up with all these different ideas. They're playing with you. That's all that is. And by the way, those experiences they had are real, just as my experiences I had. I have no doubt that they're real, but this is where the moral training comes in, because those people come back. They have an aha moment. They go back to whatever. We have a smorgasbord of religions, whatever they, whatever raises their vibration, changes who they are. I learned that in Freemasonry. Doesn't matter. I'm Catholic. I'm Mr. Catholic, but you do you. They come back. They start attending, let's hypothetically say, a church. They find God again. They start following Jesus and all the tenets thereof. They change their vibration and they leave them alone. So that's really what a salamander is. And they listen, left unchecked, they will do some pretty freaky stuff. The church in its infinite wisdom says, don't play with that, for good reason. It's not a good idea to say, hey, I want to play with my, what was it? This lady from Czech. She has an active elemental in her restaurant in the Czech Republic right now. And she says, I love him. I said, you need not to do that. And she goes, oh yeah, he wants to have sex with me. I mean, I'm like, what are you doing? No, don't mess with. But what happens is they interact because he leaves her gifts all the time. And when they get into gnomes, it's the same thing. They will try to suck you in.
Yeah, because ceremonial magic, and even the Goetia folks, they've always talked about taking control of the elementals and getting them to do your bidding, which is very interesting. Do you remember a book? Do you remember a book? There was a book my uncle recommended to me many years ago. He grew up with it, and you've talked to him. His name was Rick, but his favorite book growing up was Telecult Power by Reese P. Dubbin.
We talked about that. Yes.
I know we have. It's a great book. We should do a show on that sometime. That would be really interesting. Telecult Power by Reese P. Dubbin, Parker Publishing in the 1970s. He has an area that you can use these things called solo words, and they found them not only from studying people in churches that were praying in tongues and other areas, like he had Trinca 5, Roma, and all these sort of names that you can use.
I've done that. I've used those. Those are good.
And he says he claimed you could get help by these invisible helpers that will help you with certain things, and they do work, which is amazing. And that book's amazing because it teaches you to hear people's thoughts. It teaches you to command things into existence, all sorts of secret sciences that have been unveiled from a long time. And it's interesting that there would be folks around us that have been here for a very long time, watching us, lingering around us. And these elementals appear to be part of that equation.
There are infinite amount of dimensions and spirit types. And so people aren't wrong when they say this entity exists or this type of entity exists. According to Paracelsus, absolutely they exist. They are, it's funny because when we get into disembodied spirits a little bit, we'll talk about, oh my gosh, where you're reborn again, reincarnation, right? And man, yes, those ideas that you're having, you're not being reincarnated. It's that entity that is reincarnated. And what you're experiencing is that entity's experiences. If you're along the Christian line,
That's an interesting
that's
hypothesis. That's an interesting hypothesis.
Yeah. Okay. So, but anyway, fire. That's what it is. So left unchecked, it's a terrible. And then don't worship them. Understand they exist. Change your vibration. Become the best, purest you can be. They will leave you alone. All right. That's just where God. If you're Christian, that's where God, Jesus comes in. If you're Muslim, that's where their ideas come in. If you're Hindu, that's where they're right. It's that arching theme. You're never alone. The thoughts you have are not your own. I live in the West. I feel very comfortable with my my faith because I grew up with it. You got something else. God bless you. Do your thing, but be the best you can be. Otherwise, they will live vicariously through you. So let's go with water now. Now, water. Now, my wife is a water spirit. There's no doubt in my mind. I've even talked to her about it, and she agrees. She's like, "Yeah, you're a salamander, and I'm water." She was a prominent swimmer when she was young. She blew her shoulder out, so she couldn't do that anymore. But she was always around the pool, had the kids in the pool. She loves water. She's also pure love, right? Very important. They're often displayed, well, they're undines, but they're often displayed as mermaids for a reason, because of their loving nature. Also, may I suggest that fire is the sun, the male. And the moon is water, is the female. Now, a lot of people don't know, like I said with salamanders, same thing with mermaids. Don't piss them off. You ever heard of a woman scorned? Those, if that entity is attached to you, and let's say you may even have a relationship. I know certain Muslim groups have sex and things with these entities. But may I suggest that
are you referring to the jinn? Recently, we had Harry Challenger on the show, and he was talking about the jinn. And they have, we talk about incubus and succubus. There's a long history of that sort of thing.
That's right. Absolutely right. Exactly. That would be under the more spiritual elementary category, because they play vicariously right through. The elementals would be a different category. But they still do the same thing. They're usually sexually, like they're sexually aroused, and incubus, succubus. So elementals, but we know that mermaids will turn on people. A sailor, some of the incidents they had around or in water. Those mermaids, for whatever reason, if they, like they do what they come natural to them, they don't like you. There can be very destructive, and sailors have talked about it. Seamen have talked about it. People that lived along the oceans and things like that. So they're very much aware of that. But again, they can be very loving if they like you. They can be they can give you gifts. They can be protectorate. That's why people worship them. May I suggest, we learned that from Greek and Roman mythology. Remember that demarcation of Christ, right? Now you have an option. I wouldn't personally. No, there ain't no way I'm messing with that. I got my protector and I'm good. Then let's go with Earth. I believe you are too, but I'm Irish. I'm definitely Celtic. I'm like 98% Celtic, but which is basically Northern Europe. They went all the way down to Turkey. The Romans pushed them back to the Isles, basically. But so we know that they're called gnomes. That's the Earth, right? The little people. Well, what are they known for? Giving people gifts, helping them, protecting them. But we also have
minerals,
stories.
Rocks.
Yeah, but if you upset them, like kicking a dog, they can be terrible little demons.
And this was also known as the fairy kingdom in many areas as well. So this is how we divide those places up.
Well, it's folklore in the sense, element of truth to it, but people have a tendency to think that folklore is fantasy. It's not fantasy. Prior to Christ, things were a little bit different. They were more active in the world. People interacted with them a lot more. And so we have these stories going forward. People try to understand, like St. Patrick. How is it St. Patrick was able to convert Ireland in one day? It's a story, right? It's not true, but how was St. Patrick in one day? All they did is rebrand the old idea. Why do American Indians don't have a problem joining Christian groups? It's the same thing. It's a rebranding. They just say, oh, yeah, it's a good idea, but we're going to keep doing our stuff, right? But yeah, we're going to go along with this. It's not really a big deal to a lot of the ancient ideas, okay? It's not converting to a Christian religion is not a big deal for them because they see the similarities. We know that. So that's what the gnomes are. They live in rock, around rock. They're, again, infinite amount of dimensions. There are different coarseness. They come and go. You can see them. They disappear like a UFO. They come and they go. That's why he called them spirits, because they literally, they're here, they're gone, and so forth. Whereas elementaries, generally, you don't see them. They're kind of like they call them parasites, like a parasite in your stomach. They're around you. They're not necessarily in you, but they influence you. Also, the elementals, they are a hierarchy system. They control elementaries, just as disembodied spirits control elementals and elementaries. That's what Paracelsus said. So it's really interesting. Let's go with what was the last one? Air. Well, we talked already about orbs, right?
And then we also bring in traditionally the sylphs, which can sometimes be thought of as little Tinkerbell-like fairies people see. They can be bigger.
Exactly. Right. See, these you can see from time to time, especially if you have eyes to see, right? You can see them or you can hear them. It's real funny. Our cat, we have a little cat that just died a few months ago, and literally, I can feel her walking across the bed. I mean, it's like,
wow.
I mean, she's still around. I mean, she's still there. She'll still make those little noises. And my wife said, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah." If you're sensitive to these beings, right? They don't die. The soul doesn't die. It just goes to another dimension, shall we say? But yeah, the sylphs would be the little beings, but there are also orbs. They're the ghostly figures. The white you might see are black, and depending on the light. A lot of it has and they, of course, we know that they can be messengers. They can do good. They can do bad. They don't have a soul. That's what's important. They're attracted to your soul or your lack thereof of a soul, of a non-activated soul in particular, because they're bicorporal. They can live vicariously through you. They're a previous experience.
When you look back at Paracelsus and these others, and you look at the doctrines that were taught, we looked at the animal and the plant kingdom and everything as having more of an oversoul, a group spirit, so to speak. So, it would be as if one of them would feel pain. And I'm not saying that they don't feel pain, because they do. And there is a karmic debt that comes with any of those interactions. If we look at the various philosophies and theosophies, but it's like they would have this collective soul, whereas human beings are thought to have more of an individualized soul. That's interesting.
But may I suggest, and I get that, but may I suggest collective?
Exactly. Well, yeah, that too. Human beings have the collective as well.
That's what I'm saying. For example, I can communicate with the angelic, the Great White Brotherhood, whatever you want to call them. I ask them questions all the time. Absolutely.
And it comes to you. Do you remember what Emerson and Thoreau talked about with the oversoul?
Correct. And what it is, and they don't answer me. They answer we. It's very important. I will say, hey, is Albert Pike there? Oh yeah, he's here. Can I talk to him? You are talking to him. It's weird. Once you're opened up to that pathway, that you're not alone, and they are sending you your thoughts. They are. That's where prayer manifestation comes in. They are. I asked them. I said, "What do you do all day? What do you do?" Is it relevant? Of course, in the spirit world, right? It's totally different time lapse. They say what you should have done here. Right? You should, if you want, you should be serving humanity. We serve humanity as an angel. That's what you do. That's all you do all the time.
Angelos, messenger in the Greek. They're messengers that serve humanity.
Messengers, correct, of God. But again, when you're talking, and even church doctrine says you're talking to one angel, you're talking to them all. And so the idea of a collective soul, a collective consciousness, we are part of a collective, but remember, the choice is yours. What is your free will? You can say bad, black magic, good, white magic, Christianity, Hinduism, Muslim, whatever you're smart.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing. Manly Palmer Hall writes about white magic and black magic and the secret teachings of all ages. And I think another definition of it would be those that try to impede their will on others, to try to control others of what they're going to do, try to take away their free will and force them to do something. Let's say that you were performing some kind of magic, which when we look at magic in theory and practice, or you look at the idea of will and you're exuding your thoughts and your energy upon somebody. If you're trying to say, I want to force this person to bend to my will to do as I please, you might say that's a type of black magic. But if you're leaving the results up to the greater good of all, and you're placing it in the hands of the supreme being, if you're putting it out into the universe and allowing the universe as a peristasis, and you see this idea of oscillating thoughts and how all these entanglements work, that it all kind of has a cohesiveness to it in the white magic sense.
Absolutely. So, for example, manifestation. The book that we previously talked about, right? I experimented with those words. Of course, my intent is
solo
always
words,
right? But your intent is always good. They will teach you, even in manifestation, if it's positive, it's love, it's good, you will manifest brilliant stuff. However, when you start doing bad stuff, what happens is when you project it out, it comes back. If it doesn't find a home, which oftentimes it doesn't, it comes back to you, because that person has to accept what you sent, right? So if you're sending love, it's no good. And by the way, if they don't accept your love, it comes back to you. It doesn't hurt you. It's like, oh, I get more love. But what happens if you send something negative out, comes back to you, and what happens? It's bad. That's why you really don't want to force a square peg in a round hole. Just go the path of least resistance. Just go with the flow, and life is easy. This is where the moral teachings that we know in our society. We live in a Judeo-Christian culture. If we know what our laws, everything is based on that. When you follow those laws, you don't go to prison. You don't get hurt. Chances are you diminish those chances greatly if you find you're following the moral law of your culture. All right. And so anyway, that's what we learn from these spirits, all four, definitely. And then, of course, the fifth is the ether. Now, they live only in their element. Now, you and me, Johnny, we're made of all five elements. So that's how they influence us, right? We have all five of them in it. We're
like ether. Portals. We're portals. They move through us.
I'm glad you said that. The subconscious mind, Helena Blavatsky said that the path to the spirit world is your private morality, the thoughts you have in your head, what's coming in and out. The portal is right here. As long as you don't block it with a bunch of trash, right? And the Bible says, for example, get rid of all the noise. That's why meditation is going to get rid of all the noise and listen to the voice of God.
Well, yeah, and now even Einstein alluded to that many times, and he said imagination is the preview of life's coming attractions, and even more, right? We're talking about the subconscious, how it influences us.
It's a pathway to the spirit world, because the spirits,
correct.
Really, again, we're assuming all spirits are bad. No, they're benign. Now let's go ahead and get into disembodied spirits, because this is really interesting. Because remember, disembodied control the elementals and the elementaries, just as you control all of them with your behavior or your lack thereof. You were made in God's image, just like let's say a disembodied spirit has the same power as God in that sense, not ultimate power. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. So a disembodied spirit. When a Christian says, when I die, I'm going to go to heaven and spend my days with God, right? Okay.
Yes.
That's what they mean. That isn't exactly 100% right, but that's what they mean. When I die, I'm a good person. Well, wait a minute. What are you basing your goodness on? It feels good? No. We got wokeism groups today say, look at me, look at me, look at my new sexuality, look at my nails, look at my car. No, 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 no. Just because it feels good doesn't mean you're good, right? We have thousands of years of experience of what moral behavior is and what aberrant behavior is, black, what moral behavior is, good, right? God. And so you make that distinction, and we know that it changes your vibration, which will affect yourself. So when, let me say my path, the way I'm perceiving it, okay? So, and I don't like talking about the afterlife because I fought too hard to be here. I want to stick around a long time. So let's not talk about me. Let's talk about how the church will perceive it, okay? So when they say hell, hell is just a separation from God. It isn't, and I used to even think purgatory was down there and they're all playing with you and everything. No, the purgatory is a resting place for the worthy. And how they define that, I'm not exactly sure, but let's just say when you die, you don't have these beings attached to your soul. You're going here. It's sort of that we talked about, that life review. And eventually you're going to be judged by God, and then you'll spend the rest of the days with God. Okay, at some point.
It's interesting because when people pass, and there's different traditions about this. I've talked to folks in even Jewish households. In Jewish traditions, they cover up the mirrors in their house for about 2 weeks. And this has always interested me, because even in the writings of Robert Bruce in Astrodynamics, he says when you're out of the body in your astral form, if you see a mirror, you see this anomalous world you get stuck in. So you never want to look into a mirror in your house when you're out of the body. But they say that they believe the spirit in some cases kicks around the house, observing everybody for at least 2 weeks as the subtle bounds of energy are unwrapping. And this is why in funerary customs, which by the way come from Egypt, that we still practice today, you see people wearing black because the energy is subtle. You have the flowers because of the energy there. There is a disentangling of this process. In some cases, people believe that the Eastern practice of cremation releases the spirit faster.
The spirits from the soul is what they're trying to do, like a vampire.
It's a very interesting process that takes place. So we are seeing that when you talk about this purgatory, and there's like a holding, and some go at different levels. It depends on how fast their development is.
Right, based on worthiness. Now this is interesting because hell, let's talk about hell, which is a separation from God. Now remember, if you didn't activate your soul, you have all these entities in you, like literally the saints and some of the church doctors, they're talking about hundreds and thousands of entities that when they do exorcisms and things like that, they're not just one. There's like a whole bunch of them, and some of them, they'll like a collective, they'll work together to really mess with that person. That's why people go crazy sometimes, right? And this is probably appropriate time. So in Freemasonry, we have the square and compass, which is as old as time itself. It goes back 20,000 years ago to China. And they were using it as moral instruction for their leadership, military, political, and religious classes, okay? The 1%, just like the mystery schools. The distinction is Christianity tried to bring it to the masses, rebranded it, gave it to the masses. But the square, so the compass is the spirit world. The square is the material world. We live in two worlds, right? And what happens to the person that is all in the spirit world? They're walking down the street, they're talking to something, right? There's someone, we know that. And then of course they'll get communication to try to shut it down so they're functional. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. They got to keep adjusting their medication. But the point I'm getting at is they're literally all in the spirit world. They can't function in the material. And on the other end, we're looking at wokeism today, right? But my point is, you live in two worlds. Scottish Rite Freemasonry teaches you the balance of two worlds. We know that you're being influenced by the spirit world. You're never alone. The thoughts you have are not your own. That arching theme of all religions, philosophies, everything. It's all trying to understand, where are we getting these thoughts? What's influencing humanity? Why did Carl Jung say that we need the morality of religion, or we go insane? It's real simple when you look at these overarching themes that is a universal idea of all religions and philosophy. So we are influenced by the spirit world, and that's important. So let's talk about these spirits. When you die, what happens if you lived your life, you had all the luxuries, you slept with every woman you could, or every guy you could, or whatever.
All the hedonism out there.
By the way, it's not always sex. It could be food. It could be, money. It could be, power. It could be anything. You destroyed people's lives, whatever it was, any aberrant behavior. What happens to your soul? Well, remember those spirits.
Well, I'm reminded of what Jesus said in the Bible. He said, by their fruits you shall know them. And we're also taught in the Rosicrucian teachings about the golden wedding garment of Christ. And that when you see someone, they might have a very beautiful garment, just like it talks about in the Bible, the robes of righteousness of the soul, the types of colors to the soul. And your soul is a sum total of your embodiments. But at the same time, if you have someone that's had a very righteous life, that's done a lot of good, and they've had a lot of good thoughts, has a good heart, you might see a very bright, beautiful soul, or you might see something that's pale and that's fading, and it's a torn garment. And I think this is an important teaching to keep in mind, that when we look at it from that angle.
It really, and I learned this in Freemasonry too. It doesn't matter, listen, I pick what I feel comfortable with. Whatever your religion, whatever your doctrine, just be the best you can be, and understand that these worlds do not listen, to anyone. They're sitting and waiting. Okay. And by the way, we talked about fire real quick. Let me go back to fire. I forgot to tell you this. Go to a medieval church, and what do you see on the outside of that medieval church? Gargoyles. Well, what are those? They're lizard-like creatures. Why are they protecting the church? They're there. They're doing what they're supposed to do. If activated, they can be a protectorant of you. But that's the way they perceived it at the time. So these are not aberrant ideas. So the soul, when you die and you go into the astral realm, the ether, whatever, heaven, whatever you call it, lower level, definitely, you don't detach yourself from those spirits. They stay with you. That's what they call Dante's hell. That's what they're talking about. They're playing with you forever. And now I understand, again, I don't know about Catholicism, but I understand, according to Paracelsus and others, that these entities will eventually dissolve after their purpose has been fulfilled. So
this is in Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about similar things. And the idea is that once one purifies their thoughts and their actions, and like you said, morality, you could align yourself with a greater energetic form, and you're going to have less of these other energetic life forms trying to attach themselves to you. It's sort of like if you're fishing and you want to catch a certain type of fish, you're going to use a certain type of bait. And if you're baiting them all the time with certain thoughts and actions, that's the sort of thing you're going to pull around you. A very righteous person will have a lot of good dharma and good energy, and they'll be very protected. Hank, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And do you have any final thoughts for the folks?
I do. There's one more point. Okay. I just want to put this all in perspective. So, for example, I was talking to my priest, right? And we were talking about confessions. I talked to him, I confessed, like counselors, basically. And I said, well, do you want me to tell you about the 5 times today that I had an inappropriate thought, not always sexual, but a thought that I shouldn't have? And I said, I immediately cast it out. And he goes, so you didn't act on those thoughts? I said, oh, hell no, I know better. And no way. That's the protect. You're going to get the thoughts. You're not going to be pure all your life. The thoughts are going to come in, but you need, like a Pentecostal, you need to cast it out right away. If you can cast it out and say, no, I don't want to do that. I refuse to even entertain that anymore. Go away. It goes away.
Yeah. In the Golden Dawn teachings, when you go back, and you go to McGregor and Mathers, they said when you got an obsessive thought in your head, when it was coming over and over again, everyone's had a thought come in their head. Maybe you were influenced by watching a movie or a show, and you said, well, this isn't me. I wouldn't do this. And you get it in your head. They recommended doing the LBRP or the Rosy Cross or one of these sort of prayer or things that you would do that this sort of cleanse the
Correct.
slate and realign the mind. And this is something that can also be there in case you have like an OCD that you're worried about something. And this is all very important. My friend, thank you so much for joining us. It was a fascinating show. I can't wait to have you back on again. And everyone, if you want to join Hank and our wonderful group on the Ancient Mysteries of Egypt tour, that'll be on March 2023. All the information will be below, as well as how you can find Hank. You'll find all his websites. You can get his book on Amazon, and you can also look up his talks on YouTube. And again, you definitely don't want to miss out on those. You can find all the information about everything we got going on down below. And don't remember, hold on a second, getting a little bit hazy there. I need to go for lunch. You can find all the information below about that. And you can find all the information below about that. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment down below, and share this video with your friends. And we will talk to you all on the next episode.
Look forward to seeing everyone in Egypt.